Doom and gloom, panic, bank runs, the Silicon Valley Bank going down. What is going on in the market? We don't know which way the market's going to go, but I can give you a chart. I can give you an idea, a overall strategy that'll give you a very good idea of what is happening in that moment during the market open, during the market trading. We don't need to predict where the market's going to go. We just need to know how to react to it. Today, I'm going to show you guys a chart that I really love with two very simple indicators. I'm going to show you right here in this video how you can capitalize off of all the volatility in the overall market today, trading options or trading futures or even trading ETFs. Let's go. What's going on, guys? Patrick here. I want to give you guys a very simple chart. Very simple. It's almost too simple. And it's a chart that I think if you're a beginner day trader, you're an expert day trader, or whatever it is, you need to have this chart pulled up on your screen. What chart is it? What time frame and what indicator am I thinking about? What am I talking about? I'm sure if you watched my videos long enough, you probably already know where we're going. But for anybody that's new to the channel, I have two indicators that I really love. That's the VWAP and that's the pivot points. Take a look at the chart here. The first chart that we're pulling up here is the 3-minute chart. This is the chart that we talk about pretty much all the time here on the channel. This is the chart, the indicators, everything that we talk about in the Market Flow Trader course for trading futures. Very simple, but also there's a lot of stuff going on. You got 3 different EMAs. You got the MACD down below. There's a strategy behind this. You guys kind of already understand, I think, the idea of buying the breakouts, buying the breakdowns and all that. You need to understand it, right? Like you really kind of got to dive into and spend some time figuring out how this strategy works and how this chart all lines up with all the different indicators. So let's give you a even simpler chart, a even simpler setup here. If we pull up the 3-minute chart, this is the SPY chart. We're using the SPY ETF chart. The reason that I like to use the ETF SPY chart here is that there's a couple. The reasons that I like to use the SPY chart is I do feel like the SPY chart, when the market is open, really likes to hit the VWAP and it loves to respect these pivot points a little bit differently than the overall market, maybe the SPX or, you know, futures, different stocks. But when it comes to the SPY is almost like pinpoint on hitting these different levels and respecting the VWAP and things like that. One thing that you can notice right away, this is the 3-minute chart with the SPY, is that basically every major move that happens on the SPY either happens off of a pivot point or it happens off of the VWAP. So you can see we kind of chopped around, put in those higher lows, got tighter, and then pushed up. But that move right there, that break to the upside, started off of the VWAP, right? So if we know that most of the moves happen off of the VWAP, well, if we get all the way up to here, like really far away from the VWAP, we're like, well, there's probably a good chance we're going to pull back to the VWAP, or something's going to happen to kind of get us a little bit back down to that VWAP to get closer, because we know that the SPY loves to respect the VWAP. It loves to respect the pivot points. So, you know, if I'm here long, and let's say I get long to 389s on the SPY and we get this push up, well, then I'm looking obviously to push up here into that next possible pivot point there, the 394. So the strategy is very simple. You're basically looking for reactions off of the VWAP that would then lead to the pivot points, or you're looking for reactions off of the pivot point that would push us back up to the VWAP. So you have like these two indicators that are kind of working together. The idea that no major move would normally happen off of the SPY until we interact with the VWAP. So we had this move here from the 389s up there, the 393s. You could even go to like a 5-minute chart maybe on this. Yeah, let's go to the 5-minute chart. I kind of go back and forth between 3-minute, 5-minute time frames on the SPY. But again, you know, this was the big move from here to here. All right, perfect. So that was an easy trade. If we were long, you know, we make an easy 20, 30 handles on that move up there. Easy peasy, mac and cheesy. If you're trading options on the SPY, that's a good idea. The idea here was you had that high, and then we get that breakout. We basically turn those highs there into support, and there's that push up. So the strategy here is very simple. again, I'm trying to reiterate this, that no major move happens until we interact with the VWAP or we interact with the pivot point. So here on this move, we already interacted with the pivot point right there. And then we got that VWAP touch, and then we were off to the races. What I want to show you here is an absolutely beautiful setup here. As we pulled back, the problem is, let's say you're getting this move back down and you're like, well, I don't know if I want to get long here, what I want to do on this bounce. You can always look at the bigger time frames, right? Don't ever be afraid of looking at the bigger time frames. If we look at the 15-minute chart, well, clearly you see this sell down. We're not trying to get long off the VWAP there. Like I'm not trying to get long when we had that big sell back down there. We had this push up, we get denied. You can see the wick on the top of that candle. We pull back, we hit the VWAP right there. Perfect. So we pull back to the VWAP, and then we have this level right there. Again, guess what's happening? The VWAP's turning into resistance. So now the VWAP is turning into resistance. We go back to the 5-minute chart. We can see how the VWAP is now acting as resistance there. So the plan here would be basically shorting off of the VWAP, using the VWAP as our kind of stop area, getting that move down there. We have that pivot point down there. You can see the market actually ended up kind of bouncing back up into that pivot point before making that move lower. But the one thing that I do kind of want to point out here is that when we push back up to that, when we pushed back up into that, you know, if you're looking at this, you want to look at every time frame, obviously. It's not just like, hey, we're going to just only trade off of that time frame. But look how there was like support right there at that level. So if you were short, remember from the VWAP break, you still got 20 points to the downside, but you're still thinking that there's a good chance we're kind of bouncing off this level here. And then we push up again, hit that VWAP, and then that major move happens. So what do we have? We have that push back to the VWAP. Again, the idea that no major move happens until we interact with the VWAP. So we get stuck right here. This was actually the best short entry of the day. Best short entry of the day, easily the best short entry, because we push back up, we get denied, and then it's just off to the races. We break below this pivot. So the idea is we get short right here. When the VWAP acts as resistance, we target that next pivot point. If we get below that pivot point, well, then we target the next pivot point down to the downside there. You can see how we then bounce. We didn't get all the way down there. We got about 30 cents, 40 cents from that pivot point down there before, again, pushing back up here, tapping the pivot point once again. So the way that I would play this, if I'm short from here, my first target's here. Second target's kind of like down in here. Again, guys, we're looking at, you know, support resistance on all the different time frames, but in general, it's like if we get below this pivot here, we think the market would move lower. I mean, that's an easy 40, 50 handle move on the ES. Lots of profit. If you didn't take profit on this move down, well, you know, I don't know how you wouldn't have taken profit if you're up 40 handles at that point. So the SPY then pushes back up, taps the pivot point there again. Inside kind of just starts again, you know, interacting with the VWAP here. You can see how the VWAP once again kind of getting up there, getting denied. The pivot point kind of end of day, kind of chopping around. We still had that another sell-off, but in general, I want to point out, you know, the very clear idea that no major move happens on the SPY until we really interact with that VWAP. And look at this again. This is on Thursday. So on Thursday, we're acting at the VWAP, we're bouncing around the VWAP here. Guess what happens? We get below the VWAP there and we sell all the way down. So we interacted with the VWAP, you know, throughout this time. This is at 11 o'clock. After 11 o'clock, we just ended up waterfalling down and just moving down to those pivots. We hit that pivot there, we hit the pivot there, we hit the pivot there. You can see how basically those pivots constantly acted as support, support, support. We get these little bounces, but we keep moving down off of those pivots. Same thing the day before. On Wednesday, we're just kind of chopping around at the VWAP there. We finally get the break below the VWAP. That major move happens again. I mean, this is not just me cherry picking. This is like every single day we're looking at this, right? Again, we get pushed up here to the VWAP. This is like a really good setup again here. We had this big sell-off at 10 o'clock. We push up there. Guess what? We got stuck right there in the middle of that candle, which is also that pivot. We had the VWAP to get interacted with, and there's that big move down to that next pivot from the 402s down there to the 399s. And you can see, what do we got? Once again, what is the moral of the story here? That no major move happens until we interact with the VWAP. If we can interact with the VWAP and the pivot point, I mean, that's like the holy grail of setups. Getting denied at that pivot, getting denied at that VWAP there, and then getting that big move down from the 401s down there to the 398s, that next pivot. 397. I mean, that's fucking, this is money all day right there. This is money, baby. Serious money. I mean, we're just going back. Like, this is not me cherry picking in hindsight. I just want to make it very clear, you know, that the idea for this strategy is that no major move happens until what? We hit the VWAP. We interact with the VWAP. I mean, we're just going back here. We can see, you know, even here on Thursday, March 2nd, I mean, we just kind of chopped around the VWAP all day and then finally made that move at the end of the day. But again, the moral of the story, you know, that VWAP really has to we got to interact with that VWAP. That's what it comes down to. That VWAP is there here. You know, we're chopping around. We're getting these moves up. We're getting the moves down. And again, that VWAP, very, very active in the overall price action. I mean, it's constantly, we're just constantly searching for that VWAP. The SPY, I would say, is just constantly searching for VWAP. Here, this is a great move. This is Thursday, the 23rd of February. Again, we open up, we chop around the VWAP. We get stuck right there, 1040. We get below the pivot, we get below the VWAP, and then we sell all the way down there, like 4 points. And then guess what? We bounce off this pivot right there, and we rally all the way back up. The thing about this is we really want to just always have an idea of those possible pivot areas. Also, guess what? We have the gaps as well in the ETF showing up beautifully on the SPY. We had this big gap right there. We open up, we sell down, we fill that gap, we continue to sell down, and you can see, again, VWAP resistance, the gap in the chart. I mean, this right here is like the money setup for the SPY setup. If you're trading options, you're trading futures, whatever it is, clearly when we get a gap in the chart like that and we have those pivots down there and all this is kind of lining up, we're below the VWAP. I mean, this is a short all day long, my friends. An absolutely beautiful short to fill that gap there. Those gaps love to get filled. We've talked about that so many times on the channel, the idea of these gaps getting filled. Right here, again, another beautiful setup. We get below the VWAP. The VWAP turns into resistance. And guess what? We just sell all day long. We had one more kind of interaction with the VWAP right there. When we can't get back above the VWAP right there, this is your short opportunity. And there's that big move down. So absolutely just a very simple, I would say very just like patient type of strategy. Like the problem with this strategy is you're going to have to be patient. Like there's going to be days where we're going to go sideways, you know, we're going to just ride that VWAP for hours. And then finally the setup is going to come. I mean, this is not a strategy where you just simply just, oh, I just go crazy. I buy, I sell, I just do every 5 seconds. You got to be patient. But this strategy is very simple. And if you're looking for just a simple idea of trading off the VWAP, trading off the pivot points, I don't think you can really go wrong here. I usually look at the 5-minute chart, the 15-minute chart. Basically, anything under 15 minutes is what you're kind of looking at to keep those pivot points at those areas. If we go above 15 minutes, well, then those pivot points are going to change. The whole thing about this is I want you guys to see everything that I'm looking at. You know, I'm looking at different time frames, I'm looking at different indicators, I'm looking at all this different stuff. But I would say I'm always kind of keeping an eye on where the SPY VWAP is and where those SPY pivot points are. I think you can really build a very solid strategy for trading futures, for trading options on the SPY, just by keeping a very close eye on those pivot points and keeping a very close eye on the VWAP. So the VWAP, the pivot points, your really big focus. If you guys want to learn more about my overall strategies and all the stuff that I have here on YouTube, but also really getting more in depth, showing you guys the whole process, all the indicators that I'm using and all that fun stuff, you can learn more in the Market Flow Trader community. And there it is, giving you guys just a little idea for a very simple and strategic strategy here to learn how to really kind of trade the SPY and to keep an eye on the overall market. Keep an eye on the SPY, keep an eye on the NASDAQ. This would also probably work on the QQQ as well for the NASDAQ. If you're trading the NASDAQ futures, you could put those pivot points, put the VWAP on the QQQ ETF, and also still see those gaps in the chart as well. So I'll see you guys 9:15. We're live every morning, Monday through Friday. Let's go.